Amen. It is good to trust him. Would you guys grab a Bible? Join us this evening. We are in the book of Ecclesiastes on Wednesday night. On Wednesdays, we journey through the Bible at about a chapter a night pace. Tonight, we are in chapter 11 of the book of Ecclesiastes. Got one more chapter, and so excited just journeying through this. We're hoping you brought a Bible. If you didn't, there's Bibles in front of you. You can grab one in the chairs in front of you, page number on the screen. Welcome to use an electronic device. Follow along in that kind of capacity. That's true here, in our overflow, online, wherever that is. We invite you, even if you're watching this at a later space, that you grab a Bible. And it would be through God's Word that He would speak to you this evening. We need that. We need His voice in our life and longing that He would move in that even right now. So I'm going to lead, but I'm going to invite you to pray as well. As we do, I find myself thinking, if you're reading with us in the daily Bible reading, you got to read the book of Joshua today, and he has this incredible encounter with this one that is probably a theophany, probably a Jesus kind of showing up in the Old Testament kind of thing. And, you know, he kind of approaches him, and he's like, whose side are you on? He's like, neither. I'm not on either side. I'm the commander. And Joshua falls on his face, and he has this great statement. He says, you know, what does my Lord have to say to his servant? I just want to invite you to say that tonight to the Lord, that we just go before him right now in prayer, and that you would be able to come before him, humble yourself before him, and just ask him. Say, God, I'm here to hear you. I'm here to hear what you want to say to me. What does my Lord have to say to his servant? Would you just join me in that? Father, we thank you right now. And I think about just getting to read that in Joshua today and recognizing it's where we get to come before you right now. Where we can be so selfish. And so often we can see the whole world as if it revolves around us. It doesn't. And even in this moment of time, you haven't come to be for us or against us in that sense. You're God. You're the commander. You're the one who is sovereign over everything. And Lord, that's just right for us to come in and acknowledge that, worship you, humble ourselves before you right now, and then to take Joshua's words and make them ours. What does my Lord have to say to his servant? Lord, you're the Lord, I'm the servant, we're the servants. Lord, would you speak to us in the midst of this evening? Would you speak to us through your word, that we hear you would say to us by your power? We ask for that together right now. And God, we ask it from you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Meaningless. That's kind of what we've called our whole series, right? I mean, in some ways, that's the very message of the book of Ecclesiastes, that life on this world so often can be that way, in a space that it doesn't make sense on a natural level. Solomon approaches this. God does it through Solomon and says, okay, I'll tell you what. Let's look at life under the sun. Let's just gaze at life as if this is all there is. No heaven, no hell, just life here. And he concludes and tells us, if you live life with such a foolish perspective, it is empty. It is meaningless. Well, he's begun to pull the cover off of that. He's definitely going to do so by the end of our chapter this evening. And as we move into the final chapter, he's going to remind us, hey, that's not true. There is a heaven, there is a hell, there is a judgment, there is a God who is over all those things. But what he's still telling us is true. Life sometimes can be confusing. It just doesn't always make sense. Even when we know God, even when we love him, and how he navigates that sometimes becomes just confusing. And so he has brought that to our attention, and he wants to help us continue to navigate that road. And so with that understanding, and it's true. I mean, God's word is true. Life just looked at down here, it's an empty thing. It can be confusing. It doesn't always make sense. How do you do that? Well, we saw the nature of folly last week and the place of being called away from it. Tonight he begins with it with, well, in the first 6 verses really invite us to what I want to call kind of a diversified living. kind of a diversified living. And I think about that reality, and as we approach it, sometimes when we think about the word diversify or what that looks like, it sounds like financial advice. And I'd like to say it carefully. We think about these verses this evening, they could have some good financial wisdom to them. I mean, because our world is crazy. And the nuggets that are found here can work their way into that. But if you can track with it that way, it tracks far bigger. I think about Jesus, who would speak about looking at people and the way they handled their money. And he said, he who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. He who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. He says if there's a faithfulness and a wisdom to how you handle money, it can very often kind of flow into how you handle life itself. And yet if you handle that poorly, it so often reflects that you can handle everything else poorly as well. And so Jesus says, therefore, if you have not been faithful in unrighteous mammon, speaking of money, who's going to commit to your trust real riches, true riches? Well, we want to think about both this evening. And so as we think through these first 6 verses, there are some nuggets of wisdom, and where they land for you, just kind of as we think about handling our money, hey, that'd be good for us to process it through. But it's meant to be bigger than that. It's meant how we handle our lives, how we handle time, how we handle relationships, how we handle serving God, how we handle what that looks like in the space where we handle just all the things that he puts into our lives, ultimately being the greatest riches, where Jesus would say, these are real riches. These are the things that aren't of this world, where he would speak to the church in Laodicea in Revelation, where he's going to say, hey, come and get my riches. Come and get gold that's refined in the fire. Come and gain these things that are eternal. So as we think about this, these things tie into that. And so a few nuggets he gives us as we think about that. Notice what he says there in verse 1. He says, cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. We might say in some ways this is an invitation to invest in the future. In those days, the understanding was pretty clear this way, that to cast your bread on the waters would be, to kind of, you'd have ships that would, take, Solomon would do it this way, send ships that go out and, you'd invest in those, and maybe they'd bring back, profit from, some journey they went on, but it would be a long time. It could be months, it could be years kind of thing. And there's this invitation to say, hey, be this kind of person that invests in the future, that doesn't just live for the moment. One of the great follies of life is when people do that, when financially it's that way, when they live paycheck to paycheck, and everything is about just surviving, and there's never a space of thinking, you know what, I do this, but I'm thinking beyond this. I'm thinking, where we go in the future and how that works. And he has, one of the things he's going to tell us is we have no idea. You may find it. Again, it puts it there. And if you do this, it may be one of those things that return to us. In the midst of it, I will also say this. There are some Bible students who look on this and feel that it's not just a good investment strategy to be one who would invest in your future, but even a generosity strategy. That in some senses, ultimately, we're thinking not just about, our, future or 5 years or 10 years if God grants it, but eternity. That there is this sense of, hey, cast your, give things away because you're looking for eternal treasure. You're looking for a reward that will come to us, not in this life. And so you're not living just for this. You're thinking through life, thinking, I want that which is beyond, which is ultimately what we're invited to. Not just to think about, well, I just want to make it through today. That's my whole goal. I'm just trying to be happy today and thinking, no, I want to live for impact. I want to live for the future. I want to work through those kinds of things. And as we think through that, he adds to it this in verse 2, give to a serving of 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. This is that idea of be diversified, which I kind of titled the whole section. I couldn't think of a different word to even break it up here, so I'll just say it is this. It is a little bit of that old adage. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your eggs in one basket because you don't know. You don't have any idea if that's going to be something that succeeds, doesn't succeed. Again, a good kind of strategy for handling money and those kinds of things. Don't just stick all your money in one space. There ought to be, kind of some space around it. But life is meant to be that way. That there is a space that we, kind of try to find out multiple places where we can live for God, serve Him. We have no idea what may continue moving forward, what may altogether, end up stopping short. There is a sense of just inviting us to kind of a wise way of just knowing. It's like, I don't know what the future holds, so I'm not going to put all my life into this because this might not work out. I'm going to make sure I'm serving in multiple spaces or living my life in multiple, kind of just wherever that would work because we have no idea where this is going. He'll come back to that and say it a little bit more before we're done with these 6 verses. But again, just a good piece of wisdom. He adds to it in verse 3. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth, like they just did a moment ago. And if a tree falls to the south or the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. Kind of a little interesting nugget. Like, what did it just say? Again, because this is kind of worded in poetic sections, different Bible commentators will go different ways, but in some ways, the simplicity of it is an invitation of how we're handling life. And it's 2 different thoughts. One of them would be the idea of watching. Looking for where it's raining. Looking for where it's like, hey, that's, the rain's coming over here. This is where blessing is. And so if we're going to think through what we're spending our days with and where we're investing our life into, there is an invitation to be those who watch for and get excited about what God is doing. That we would be excited about where He's moving and where, He's going to, be involved in things and the sense of where He's blessing. Hey, it's like, I want to be involved in that too. Like where He's working, I want that to be something that I'm, also doing. And so it's an invitation where there's, clouds and they're full of rain. There's a space of blessing that's happening there. Hey, choose those things. On the other hand, if a tree falls to the south or north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. There are things that when a tree falls, there is no if you just look at it long enough, it's going to come back. What if I really am nice to this tree and, what if we pet it or, the tree's down, it's gone. It fell, and where it fell, it stays. And sometimes in life, there are places where you just get involved in something or you're spending your days and your time, and then all of a sudden, it's just gone. It's just and part of this is that space of saying, okay, well, don't cry over spilled milk. Don't sit there and just, spend your days just wishing that it didn't. It did. It's done. So now turn your life to other things. Turn your life to things that would say, okay, well, I'm not going to sit here and just spend my days sad over where it's gone because it's gone. And there's a space of just inviting us to live wisely in so doing. Verse 4, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. We think about just this invitation of handling life wisely. I think about even how, we think through spaces where God would invite us to walk in that. And again, we're talking about how we handle our money, how we handle our time, but again, even how we serve. I find myself thinking of what it says in Titus. This is and let our people also learn to maintain good works, to meet urgent needs, that they may not be unfruitful. He says when we think about how we want to do this, and one of the big themes of the book of Titus is to say, hey, we want to be about good works. We want to be about those things that God has for us. And he says, well, there's a maintenance factor that you just kind of maintain good works, but you meet those urgent needs. You look where the rain is falling. You look at what that whole thing would be. You watch how that works. But one of the things he invites us to understand is that if we're watching too much in the wrong way, it actually can lock us down. Or we would say, as he says it there in verse 4, he observes the wind will not sow, he who regards the clouds will not reap. And it has this idea of someone who's, thinking about, being a farmer, if you want to think about it that way, planting. And it's like, well, it's not a good day, Clouds, it's not perfect weather today. Yeah, it's not a perfect space. And he points out what the book of Proverbs would tell us as well. If that's how you live your life, there'll never be a perfect day. There'll never be, a perfect moment. If you live in that sense, in fear or seeking that kind of, it has to be perfect, you'll spend your whole life waiting for things that will never happen. And that's, again, just a good piece of advice for our money and how we do that, but it's even a better piece of advice for your soul. It's a weird thing. I mean, for some of us, we think about wanting to serve Jesus and wanting to live for Christ in a way that would make an impact in people. And maybe we want to share the gospel, and maybe we want to be those who open up, things that God would have, and wanting to be a part of it. And yet sometimes we can almost be in the place of, it's not a really good opportunity. It's just not a great opportunity. I need to, wait, or and you can live your whole life never actually attempting, never actually trying to say, God, I want to do this, I want to serve you. It may not look perfect. But is it ever perfect? Or what I would only see living in reverse. And there's a sense that for some of us, we think about serving God. Like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to teach that Bible study. I'm going to share the gospel with that person. That's what I'm going to do. And then you're like, well, but it's just not, it's not perfect today. There's just the wind is a little blowing. The clouds are a little there. It's got to be better than this. And we spend our whole life being, just wasting away from the things that God would have for us. And so he invites us to not live that way. He says, if that's how you live your life, you'll never sow and you'll never reap. You'll never be able to be a part of the things that God is wanting you to be a part of. And so he invites us away from that. He adds to it in verse 5. As you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how bones grow in the womb of her who's with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything. He invites us to just understand that we don't understand. He invites us into a measure of ignorance, into a place where he says, we don't know how the winds go, we don't know how bones grow, and I recognize we live in like this technological age, and some of you are like, we do. No, we really don't. I mean, it's still so much mysterious, and it's so much sovereign, and even what we do, it's just so out of our control. And he's inviting us just to recognize when we're thinking about life, again, this vain world, a world that doesn't always make sense, he invites us to embrace, there's just things we don't know. We don't really know what God is doing. We don't really know how he's going to play these things out. He says, we don't know the works of God who makes everything. It's a good space to come before our God and recognize he's working. He's working everything together for good. And he knows what he's doing. But we don't. Think about it this way for a moment. So we had this, assassination attempt on President Donald Trump on Saturday, and it's been an interesting thing for me to watch, both before that and after. It's an interesting thing that there's a whole lot of people that I either know or watch something they read or read something they have that they're like, oh, I know what God's doing. I know exactly what he's doing. Like, this is what's happening, and this is how it's going to play out, and this is what it's going to mean. And I just want to tell you, unless God gave you a prophetic word that is seriously a prophetic word, you don't know. And if I could say this very kindly, if there's somebody that thinks they have a prophetic word, well, they better be right every time that they have a prophetic word, or they're not a biblical prophet. If they're right half the time, or there's been a couple of people who've come out and said they had prophecies of even this assassination attempt, but the funny thing is they're just not that accurate. They're about accurate about half the time. And it's like, well, that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to put any confidence in something that isn't, God. And so here's where it comes for me. And again, maybe this isn't where you are, but it helps me to think this through. I'm watching. I know that God is good, and I know that he is over everything. And so, that the assassination attempt didn't work. I mean, I have to know that God is providential, he's working. What is that going to mean? I have no idea. I don't know what God's doing. I don't know where this is going to go. And there are 100 people who are, on talk shows right now and, speaking, and they're telling us whether it be from a biblical kind of, hey, this is what God's going to do, or there's political commentators that they think they know how it's going to do. And it's a crazy thing. And maybe I'm just saying what's helpful for me and I hope helpful for you. It's good sometimes to come and say, I have no idea. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not God. I mean, it could work out the way some people think it might, or it might go the other way, or it might do something entirely. I don't know what this is going to be, but I don't have to know. I mean, that's not what he's inviting me into. And yet there is a space that's hard to be there. But it's right. Again, I'm trying to think about how to say this, and maybe I'll just say one other thing and then leave it. It's troubling to me as a pastor of one who loves Jesus and loves his word, for pastors who have come out and made very bold statements from this where they know what God is going to do. And I find myself thinking, well, I hope that's a prophetic word. I hope you know what you're talking about. But I can't do that. I found myself thinking, like, when it happened, I was thinking about where we would be on Sunday morning, and we talked about it briefly, and we prayed about it. We're doing so again here this evening. But I kind of recognize that there might be somebody who's like, well, Jim, tell us exactly what this means. Like, tell us what this is, give us a biblical word. And it's like, well, okay, trust God. It's like, I can give you a biblical word. I can tell you that he knows what he's doing. And I can tell you we're invited into a space that we get to do that. Now, here's part of the problem. It's a very confusing world. It just doesn't always make sense. That's the theme of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's meaningless. Like, it just seems to move randomly at times. Like, things happen in our world and we're like, totally didn't think it was going to go that way. Totally didn't expect that. And what he's inviting us to is to say, okay, that's where we are. We need to be those. And he says, as you don't know that, you don't know what he's doing. You don't know how today or tomorrow or how this is always going to work out. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay that we don't know. It's okay, unless, again, he speaks prophetically to us that we know. We don't know. So what do? Well, he tells us. In the morning, verse 6, sow your seed. In the evening, do not withhold your hand. You don't know. You don't know what's going to prosper. You don't know what's going to go forward, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Hey, we just walk in faithfulness, that he just invites us to be faithful in whatever it is we're doing. Maybe it's something we're doing in the morning. Maybe it's something we're doing in the evening. That can be true in just a day. Some would say this easy in kind of pictures of life, early stages of life, later in life, or however it flows. Either way, it just invites us, well, I'm just going to do what's right before me. And we'll see. We'll see where this goes. We'll see where this plays out. Maybe this will move towards a revival. Maybe we'll have an awakening in our country, and that'd be amazing. And maybe it'll go the other way, and within a year, some of us will be in prison for Christ. I don't know. I don't know how this whole thing is going to work out, and I don't have to know. I get to come into this space and say, boy, it just doesn't, there's no way to gauge life and tell us where we're going to be. In 6 months or a year. In James, it tells us that's arrogance. That's arrogance to say we know where it's coming. Instead, we're invited into this place of being able to trust God and just say, okay, well, God, I'm just going to navigate things through. And so that would involve, again, money, time, or serving Jesus. And we'd find ourselves living in a world that it just doesn't always make sense. And we're not sure where it's all going to go, but here's what I'm going to do. Boy, I'm going to think past this day and thinking, hey, if we have time, this is where I'd love to see this happening. I'd love to be involved in that. I'd love to invest in these things. And yet I'm not going to put all my eggs into one basket because that basket might sink. I'm not going to put all my trust into one thing. I think there's a space of looking at it. I walk in our hallway and I see our mission board, and I love that that's a little bit of what we do. I mean, it's not like we just, okay, we're going to put all our money into one ministry, because, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you put a bunch of money into one ministry and then the ministry goes south. It's happened for us in a couple ministries that we've been involved in. It's good wisdom for us to think, well, okay, we're going to invest in a number of things. We're going to just be involved in a few other places because in case one of them, like, all of a sudden just, goes weird, we're not going to be like, that's my entire service. That's everything I've invested all my money into this, person that just went, crazy or something. I'm gonna be wise. I'm gonna diversify. I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna look for what God's doing. I'm not gonna let fear. I'm not gonna be gripped by it. I'm not gonna be, gripped by it. Instead, I'm just gonna admit I don't know, and I'm just gonna be faithful. It's just really good advice for living in a world that doesn't make sense, that is vain and meaningless at times. I love that the Bible just gives it to us. And again, if it's helpful to you this evening, I invite you to it. I invite you that you would just see it. I think about how it would tell it to us in Ephesians, where it says, see that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. It says, see that you live very carefully, you live circumspectly, you're thinking about how you're living your lives. Don't be a fool, because these are really weird days. They're evil days. I mean, evil roams the land, and so we seek to live wisely. We seek to say, okay, I want to think things through, and so the book of Ecclesiastes says, yeah, that's exactly the right way to handle this, in a way that you're looking at life and recognizing, boy, there's so much I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, but I don't want to be held back by that. Instead, I want to step forward in faithfulness, and it's a good response to you. Maybe you're doing that. Maybe I'm just encouraging you this evening in how you're already living your life. Or maybe you're stuck. Maybe you're stuck here this evening, and you've, for some reason or another, have held back in loving God or serving Him because you don't know where it's going, or you've been disappointed in a ministry or a person. I just want to invite you, hey, the tree fell. Leave it and go on to something else. Go on to serving Jesus. Don't be held back. It's never going to be a perfect day in that space, but it's always a good day just to be faithful in what God has for our lives, and it's a good space where He would call us into that. All right, well, leaving that, this call for diligence, he then comes back to one of the messages that's been in the book of Ecclesiastes, and really it's the last space that he's going to invite us to. He's going to talk to us about enjoying life. He would say it this way in verse 7, truly light is sweet and pleasant to the eyes to behold the sun. And if a man lives many years and rejoices in all of them. We'll pause there and just quickly remind you that one of the things that Solomon has told us about living in a world that doesn't make sense is don't try to make sense of it. Just enjoy whatever God puts before you. In fact, let's go back and just see the theme that's brought us to this moment very quickly. So if you'll turn back to chapter 2 for a moment, Ecclesiastes 2, let's go back to where he said it the first time. In Ecclesiastes 2, he says it this way in verse 24. He says, nothing is better for a man that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This I saw was from the hand of God. Like, this is what God is bringing into us. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This is vanity, and it is grasping after the wind. But he invites us into this place. From the hand of God, we just seek to enjoy that which God has for us. He'll say it again in chapter 3, verse 12. He says, I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It is the gift of God. He says, here's what I know. I just know that what we should do is just whatever God's putting before us, whatever is there, just to do that good thing that's right there in front of us, that's a gift. That's part of what God would lay out into our lives. He'd say it again in chapter 5. You can scan over there in verse 18. And it says, here's what I've seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy all the good of his labor, which he toils under the sun, all the days of his life, which God gives him. It is his heritage. As for every man whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. He just tells us there's a good gift that he's giving us, a space that we recognize that whatever that is, that we just, okay, this is what God's giving me into this moment. In fact, he'll say it again in chapter 8, scanning over there in verse 15, where he says it this way. So I commended enjoyment, because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat and drink and be merry, for this will remain with him and his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. Just inviting us to that space of seeing it. He'll say it again in chapter 9, verse 7. Go and eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. Let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun. All your days of vanity, this is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand, he says in verse 10, finds to do, do with all your might. Just invites us, hey, this is the portion. Like, this is the space that God gives you. This is what God gives you into your life. And so he's saying all of that. He's letting us know all that's there. And so here I meant to put chapter 11 there. It says chapter 10, sorry. In chapter 11, he says, truly light is sweet and pleasant to the eyes for a man to behold the sun. So he's inviting us to see this. So again, it's been a theme. We've talked about it a number of times, and so hopefully even just reminding you about it. Life doesn't make sense. And if you're going to live your life trying to make sense of it, you're going to be miserable. But if you can say, God, you know what? You're God. I'll just enjoy whatever you give me. I'll live the life that you put before me. That's mine. I don't have to compare it with you. I don't have to compare it with others. I can just say, God, whatever you give me, I just want to enjoy. I just want to enjoy the pleasures that you've put into this world, the pleasures that you allow in my life. I'm not going to allow just the search for trying to figure everything out rob me from all that is. And so he has called us to that. It's been one of the main themes in this book, and it's certainly one of the things that we, if we can do this well, will respond and say, okay, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just, leaving the big things with God and saying, God, whatever you give me, I'll take. I'll walk in the life that you put before me. And I'll enjoy days. I'll enjoy the food that's in front of me, the moments that I have, whatever they are. I'm not going to live my life beyond that. I'm just going to accept it and just receive it. He says that's a good way. And God is working. I mean, he is moving in the midst of it, and he invites us to do that. So as Solomon has given that to us, as God has given that to us, he comes back and he adds two quick thoughts to it that will land us for this evening, and then just begin to kind of carry us into the final chapter. So he's telling us again in verse 7, truly light is sweet. It is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. And there is this idea of thinking of pleasure and the idea of light and things enjoyable. He just kind of says, that's fun. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful when there's just light and beauty. Enjoy them. But if a man lives many years and rejoices in all of them, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. And all that is coming is vanity. Solomon gives us this thought that in one sense we understand the world that we live in. We understand its vanity, we understand its brokenness, and we know they're coming. In some senses, this could sound kind of that age-old debate between optimism and pessimism, and maybe there's something there. But it's different. There is a sense of a biblical realist that would say, I know the world I live in, and it doesn't surprise me. I'm not going to be shocked. I'm not going to be shocked that it is so. I live in a world that's marred by sin and is broken, and so I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to enjoy whatever God gives me, but I also know things are going to change. There are going to be hard days. There are going to be days, as he's going to talk about in the next chapter, that physically our bodies are moving into weakness and brokenness. There are going to be days that are hard. And one of the things about a biblical realism is that we see it. And we're not surprised by it. Neither does it destroy us in many ways. There is a sense of vanity. He says all of this is vanity. This is life here on this planet. And yet we are invited to embrace it. If you're not doing this well, It is a little bit of that optimism, pessimism kind of thing, but I'll say it's a biblical lens that you don't have right. If you are one of these people that you want to think, that everything's going to be perfect, that you love Jesus, and so he's not going to let you go through anything really, really hard, and you're going to be like, oh, this is good, I'm just going to love Jesus, it's all going to go well for me. I'm just going to tell you, either you don't see the world that's around you, or there's something coming that's going to be real, that's going to just rock your world. And you're like, I didn't know that it could be so broken down here. No, biblically, we should be like, I know it is. I know I'm going to die, and people are going to die, and death is a horrible thing. If it wasn't for Christ dying, where would we find any hope? But I know that's the world that I live in. And so he's inviting us to it. On the other hand, if you become one of these people that are jaded, that because broken things happen, you don't enjoy good things. Because you can't even enjoy anything good because you're like, it'll probably go away. So why even enjoy it? Why even? Then you've come to a wrong biblical conclusion. He's saying, no, if we can do this well, we can enjoy light when it's there, but we're not surprised that there are going to be the other days. We know that this is the world that we live in, that sin has torched it, broken it, and this meaningless kind of space moves in the midst of it. So it should be one of those places that we enjoy. We enjoy whatever God gives us to enjoy. But when the other days come, we're not like, oh, I had no idea. We're like, I kind of knew. I knew that there are these days. Not my fun. They're not fun. They're dark. They're not. They're dark days. God will carry me through dark days. He's the refuge in my darkness. But I knew that. I know that that's what this world is. It's just helpful. It's just helpful in one sense to say, hey, we want to have this balanced perspective that we enjoy life, but we're not unaware. We're not unaware, or as he says it again there, yet remember the days of darkness, because they will be many. They will be many. It's part of the vain world that you and I live in down here, and so he invites us just to that honesty in the midst of it. With that, he adds one other. He again invites us to enjoy life. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart, in the sight of your eyes. He says, just enjoy this. He says, okay, in your youth, and, in one sense, whatever that looks like, and invites us whatever, not just speaking of physical youth, but just feeling young or feeling good. He says, whatever that is, what your heart enjoys, what your eyes find pleasure in, hey, you should enjoy life. You should walk in the things that God gives. You should walk in the things that are there. There's much that we could talk about had we have time, that those ways of our heart and those sides that's right in front of our eyes, that's where we should be focused on. Not focused on what isn't there, not focused on what isn't being put by, God into our lives by God, but we see it, and our heart is enjoying it, or we enjoy those things. He says, well, we should step towards that yet. He gives a caveat that, again, begins to open up the realm of understanding to us. He says, no, for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. So you're going to make some choices, and you're going to want to enjoy life. The things are in front of you. And for God. If you're here, you're thrown judgment. Your life is going out, everything you are, everything you've done, Jesus, every word that we speak, and you're going to be condemned. That's a scary moment. That's a scary, and yet obviously we're here to tell you, God invites you to say, is that how Jesus came? He died for the nation. That if our names are written, gives us life because of Jesus. And just say that does flippantly. The Bible still tells the follower of Jesus, known as the judgment seat, you're going to give an account. It's going to be one of these things. What did you do with what I gave you? And ultimately out of that will come rewards, will come honor, will carry things into eternity. What he's inviting us to is to say, okay, so if I believe that, if I believe I'm going to stand before God, it's going to affect the way I make my choices today. Yes, I want to just, enjoy life that he's put in front of me. It's the sight of my eyes. My heart is there. But I want to know. I want to make sure I make good choices. So if you believe that, therefore, verse 10, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh. Like you should move sorrow. Some translations say vexation. Would have the idea of that which grieves or makes angry. And it certainly would have the idea of what grieves God. It's like put away anything that's going to grieve him. Put away anything that's going to hurt others. Hey, put that away. Put away evil. I'm going to stand before God, and I don't want to be, these are not the things I want to be represented in that day. He says, if I believe that, then I'm going to step towards that, because he says there's a childhood and a youth that is vanity. There's a vanity that would be in the midst of it. There's a vanity that would be in the space of it. And I would say, again, he's not just talking about age. He's talking about a childish lifestyle. People who think of none of those things. Really is one of almost the marks sometimes of a child. Like they're not worried about the end of the world. They're not worried about so many of these things, or they shouldn't be. And yet there is a space for us that as we grow into maturity, we look and think, okay, yeah, this is what's right in front of me, but I see past that. And it moves me to begin to understand, yes, I'm going to walk in life, but I'm going to live this life in light of eternity, in light of what that looks like, in light of that day that I'm going to stand before God. And so that's going to help me navigate life. Yes, we should enjoy it. Oh, he wants you to enjoy it. God has given you the ability to have joy. He created the laugh. He created the smile. He created pleasure. It is his desire for you to enjoy life. He is not pleased to think that you're too holy for that. That think, well, it's not that. No, it is actually one of the great things he has. I found myself thinking, and I don't have time to go into it, but that talk about just world, a joy awakenings, and so looking on and saying, you have joy, and I don't. We need that. People that have joy, trusting in him. Okay, God, this is my life. It may not be what people, but I'm not really worried about that, or how long. I'm just going to enjoy my life. That'd be an amazing thing. But that joy is never meant to take such control that we're not living in light of eternity, and we're not living in light of seeing God, we're not living in light of some of the difficult days. And so he's just inviting us into this space that he would say, okay, yes, enjoy life. Expect that hardness. Yes, enjoy life, but expect that judgment. And yet there ought to be a place in this world that shines. So I think that's where we're going to begin to move towards an end here this evening, but I want to come back and say it to you with an invitation. I'll begin and just say, if that's you here this evening that you don't know Jesus, we're inviting you to Jesus. We're inviting you to have a relationship with him. We're inviting you to find that the only thing that brings life and the one that rescues us from judgment is him. And if that's what you need, we're inviting you to that. But to us who know Jesus, I just want to try to echo one more moment this call from the book of Ecclesiastes, this honest call that lets us look at life in its reality. Like we're not blind to brokenness, we're not blind to vanity, we're not blind to life that doesn't make sense. But over and over, by taking you through the whole book, just there for a moment ago through the different chapters, he said, here's what we get to do. Here's our gift of God. We get to enjoy it. We get to say, God, I want to enjoy the life that you've given me. I want to enjoy what this is. And that joy is both what God longs for you to have and what our world needs to see. I wonder, how many people who look on us would say, I want what you have. You have joy, and I want it. Can I just be honest with you? I want more of it. I'm worried that I don't show it enough. I'm worried that, when I think about my family, I want them to see joy. I want them to see it. I want them to know that I found how to do it. And not the kind of joy that is, some lie. That's where our world lives. And you think about alcohol, or you think about drugs, you think about, some of the ways that our world deals with things. Those seek to create a euphoria by blinding us and in moments where you don't see it and you pretend it doesn't exist and you pretend that pain isn't there. That's never where God invites us to. He's inviting us to eyes wide open that we can look and say, our world is broken. It is. It really is broken. And it doesn't make sense. I have no idea, how this is all going to work out. I don't know what God's going to allow. I don't know. But I know him. And I'm trusting him. And I'm receiving my life as a gift. And I have a hope in him. And I really do believe not only would that be the life that God wants us to live, it would be the life that shines him into this world. So let's take a moment and pray for it. I just want to pray for you and pray for me that God would be helping us to grow even in that just thematic flow through this book that he said over and over, enjoy it. Like enjoy life, enjoy the moments, enjoy where you are, enjoy what God gives you. Do that, enjoy it. That's a gift of God. It's yours. I hope it's what God's medicine. So let's ask him for it right now. God, I think about you as the author of life. And when I think about joy, happiness, laughter, pleasure, you created it. In its original space, it was all good. Sin came and messed it up. Sin comes in and brings in pain, sorrow, suffering, and death. Sin takes your good gifts and takes them out of the space that you provided them to and makes them evil, makes them bad. God, we live in a world that's now broken because of this. Sin is rampant everywhere, and it destroys everything. God, thank you for loving us and sending us your Son. Thank you that this isn't the way it's always going to be. Thank you that you've paid the price for sin, and there's a future where it's not meaningless, where it's not empty, where there's no more pain, and there's no more sorrow, and there's no more suffering. I'm super excited about that day. Lord, I'm excited for your soon return. But till that day, we live in this world, in its brokenness, in its vanity, where it doesn't always make sense. There's so much we don't know. God, help us to trust you. But I want to bring before you this picture of joy. That though sin has made a mess of things, you've invited us to be a people of joy. Joy unspeakable and full of glory. Joy. Where you've said to us over and over and over in this book of Ecclesiastes to enjoy what you give us. It's a gift. It's a portion from you in our lives that we're meant to just receive the good gifts that you give us and enjoy them. I pray that you'd help us to do that, both because that's what you've intended, and I believe that would bring you glory and honor and you pleasure. But I know the world doesn't have it. I know that if they are altogether even remotely honest, then they would say with Solomon, it is so empty. It is so unsatisfying. It so doesn't have joy. Lord, in this world, that if we could have that, real joy, not fake joy, not plastic, pretend, covering over brokenness, but real joy. I believe it really would be a gospel space, and so I'm asking for it. I'm asking for it for all of us here this evening, but I'm asking for it for me. Lord, I want to be a man of joy. I want to be a man who experiences it, shines it, shows it, that my family, friends, people around me would see it and want what that is. Lord, forgive me where that's not happening right now. Lord, draw me towards it. Draw us towards it. Thank you that it can be found here in this broken world. That's what this book is about. There's a space for it, a space where we can have it. Lord, draw us to that even right now. Teach us it. Draw us after that and after you. And I'm so glad to be able to trust you in it, trust you with our lives, our world, all that you have. Say you're good. You are absolutely good. So we trust you, we bless you, and we lay all of this at your feet. In Jesus' name, amen.